Do you ever feel like more and more games these days follow a palpable path? That modern games are becoming more and more map marker driven? Just about every game that releases allows a player to switch off their brain and run from location to location without having to think much about what's actually happening. We're told where to go and what to do, and we just mindlessly do it. Sounds kinda like a job. That's not to say we don't think about a job, which I hope you do. But what I'm trying to say is, often we give the minimal amount of effort needed to complete a given task, especially if it's something we've done multiple times before. The same can be said about video games. In fact, we have an entire genre dedicated to such things. So if you love doing chores and want to switch your brain off entirely, I present to you MMORPGs, where you spend about 95% of your time doing mindless chores in the top right of your screen, and about 5% of the time actually having fun. And that 5% is a highly debatable number. I'm not here to shit on MMOs, because I for one love a good MMO, if one were to actually exist. But MMOs are the extreme example. Not all games are as obvious in holding the hands of the players and directing them to their next objective or the intended path of the developer. We want games to push us in the right direction, not hold our hands and do everything for us. When you order food at a restaurant, you want the cook to prepare the meal, the waiter to serve it, and for you to eat it. But you don't want the cook to prepare the meal, the waiter to serve it, then the waiter to feed you as well. Nor do you want the complete opposite, where you have to prepare the meal yourself and serve yourself. Games need to be a balance of pushing the player in the right direction while also giving enough guidance that they aren't left out on what to do next. To break this down even further, I decided to catalogue games I love and or have recently played based on the level of freedom given to the player. We have low guidance games such as Hollow Knight, Journey, and Elden Ring, which guide the player through pretty much level design and minimal directions. Next is medium guidance games such as Shadow of the Colossus, Control, and Rise of the Tomb Raider, which all guide the player through a vague direction or vague hints of what areas to explore. Following this group is the Hold Your Hand category, which consists of games such as Tiny Tina's Wonderland, Cyberpunk 2077, and Need for Speed Heat, all of which use map markers, excessive directions, and route paths to follow between locations. I then went and divided these games up again based on how accessible their guidance was. For example, in Shadow of the Colossus, you can use the Wanderer's Sword to guide you to your next Colossus. However, it's only usable in the open. It can't be used in caves or indoors, making it an almost always available guidance tool. On the flip side of this is Death's Door, a game with no accessible guidance tool except for the level design itself, making it an irregular guidance tool. I then put each of these games into their respective categories in order to determine the different levels of guidance given to the player, to help to understand how each of these games creates different levels of satisfaction in the player through guiding them through the experience. There are also outliers to the system as well. Games such as Horizon Forbidden West, which give the player the option to choose how they want to play. Do you want map markers and quest guides off or on? The player is given the choice on what level of guidance they wish to play. In addition to the outliers, there are also extremely linear games. Games like The Last of Us or Ghost Runner are some examples of games that follow a linear story, where there is no real guidance needed because as long as the player is moving forward, they will find the correct path, because there really is only one path to follow. Guidance in a game is important to creating the experience the game is offering. Without any guidance, the player has no idea what to do, nor a reason to do it. Let's start off with low guidance games. Games like Hollow Knight, Journey, Death's Door, Darksiders 3, and of course, the worst game of the year, Elden Ring. Each of these titles leave a lot up to the player. Now, if you're someone who has played each of these games, you might have noticed a bit of a similarity. These are all Metroidvania games. Okay, Elden Ring is technically open world, but for the sake of this argument, let's say it's not. Also, let's ignore that Journey is also not a Metroidvania, but that's beside the point. Metroidvania games are non-linear exploration games that limit progress through locks and keys. Metroidvania games often guide the player with as little direction as possible because the entire point is to explore and find keys or tools to unlock new pathways to progress or unlock items. One such example is towards the beginning of Darksiders 3. There is some valuable loot and a hidden pathway that you can't access. However, if you remember it's here and come back later in the game with the necessary upgrades and abilities, you're rewarded with some useful items and a lot of souls to level up. This is actually guidance through level design, where a game intentionally shows you an obvious, inaccessible area early in a game in order to burn it into your mind so that you come back later on with the necessary tools to tackle it. This type of low guidance leaves the player pretty satisfied with their rewards. That is the ultimate goal of these types of games. They want the player to feel satisfied with their exploration. They want the player to feel a sense of fulfillment when their exploration is rewarded with a boss fight or something to help them progress further in the game. They want you to feel rewarded for remembering that area you couldn't access 3 hours ago, but can now access. So why don't all games adopt this low guidance approach? Well, there are actually some issues with this approach. First of all, these types of games need a lot of your attention. If you're like me and play like 6 different games at once, it's easy to forget those areas you couldn't access earlier in the game, especially if you're only playing it for a couple of hours at most. Not only this, it's very easy to get lost or not know where to head next, because you're left to your own devices. You might miss where you need to go, or might spend hours doing side content and not progressing the story one bit. Such was my experience with Elden Ring. I spent about 50 hours doing side content before I even faced Godric. And let me say, I thought about quitting. This isn't because I didn't enjoy the game or found the game too hard, because I found the world overwhelming. There is so much to do and see in Elden Ring that if you pick a direction and go straight, you're bound to run into something, which created a problem for me. I never knew if what I was actually doing was progressing the story, the anxiety of arriving in a new area and having to explore everything, while also remembering the locations I wasn't able to access earlier in order to come back later, just became profuse. I wasn't able to enjoy the game because there was too much I had to explore, too much I had to remember, and I never truly knew if I was progressing in the game at all. And this is where low levels of guidance have the opposite effect. If a player feels lost or unsure on how they are progressing, they might just quit the game altogether, or even worse, use a guide. If players have to use an external guide rather than your in-game guidance systems, something is wrong with the game. Sure, video game players are stupid, and I'd be lying if I said I'd never missed a vital piece of information that would come back to haunt me as I waste hours trying to figure out what to do next. However, having to use an external guide breaks the connection a player has with a game. It unimmerses the player, creates a more distant feeling to the game, and generally ruins the experience even if it's just a little bit. It's important for these low guidance games to strike a balance between giving players the necessary direction to ensure they can still progress, while also not holding the hands of the player through the entire experience. I personally find low guidance games to be a bit of a pain to play, simply because I don't have enough time to sit down and play them as intended. Like I said earlier, I'm often playing other games at the same time, be it with friends or on my own in a more narrative-driven game. I don't really have the time to give these games what they deserve. However, I can't deny the satisfaction and joy I felt from finding a hidden boss or secret pathway, or just being rewarded for my explorational efforts. Medium guidance games are, to me at least, the sweet spot. You have games such as Control, Rise of the Tomb Raider, Biomutant, and Shadow of the Colossus. These games are put into the medium guidance category because they all use varying forms of guidance tools, while not using an excessive amount of them. For example, Control has map markers which point the player in the correct direction while not telling them exactly how to get there, as well as not telling them what their objective is within the area. leaving it up to the player to figure out what they have to do once they arrive at their destination. What differentiates this game from Hollow Knight, which is a game that uses a similar system, is that Hollow Knight needs other abilities that are not marked on the map in order to access the marked location. The point of medium guidance games is to point the player in the right direction when the player feels like they need the guidance, not to tell the player to find it themselves or to show them exactly how to get there. As mentioned earlier, Shadow of the Colossus does a great job at pointing the player in the right direction of their next goal, but doesn't tell the player exactly how to get there, which still creates that joy from exploring and finding important loot while also ensuring the player doesn't tear their hair out trying to figure out what to do next. Why are medium games the sweet spot? Well, they offer a balance between being guided directly to your next objective and leaving an element of mystery and exploration open to the player. You're left to feel like you're being assisted as opposed to being guided. It's like when you know your way around town, you don't need Google Maps to tell you where to go. You need Google Maps to assist you because you forgot how to get to your destination exactly. It gives the player the freedom to explore, while also knowing what and where they need to go to progress. One such example of this is Dying Light 2, where you go from linear mission to open world and back to linear missions. What I loved about this game so much was the freedom within the open world spaces to go off and do side content, explore while also knowing that I can follow the main story missions whenever I want. The game uses map markers in an exploratory manner, meaning that when you find a point of interest, like a military convoy or a windmill, it gets added to the map. It removes the stress of Metroidvania exploration by marking points of interest on the map for you to visit or revisit. You don't have to remember the 10 different secrets or pathways you couldn't access earlier in the game. Instead, you can quickly look on the map, and so long as you found them earlier in the game, you'll be able to revisit them later on. I think that medium guidance games provide a platform for players to not get lost, while also providing the satisfaction from exploring and understanding the world on their own accord. Players are given a safety net that they will always have a rough idea of where they need to go next. Maybe it's just a direction or a general area, but at least it doesn't leave them in the dark. Hold your hand games are games that provide an excessive amount of guidance tools to ensure the player always knows what to do, where to go, and how to do it. Games that have any mixture of map markers, quest markers, trails to follow to reach an objective, compasses, and waypoints are likely considered to be hold your hand games. But in saying that, not every game that has a mixture of these elements is considered in the category of holding your hand. It's more about the games that use these in excessive amounts and always have them available to the player. Games such as Cyberpunk 2077, Tiny Tina's Wonderland, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Deathloop, and Need for Speed Heat. Just because these games hold the hand of the player doesn't make them bad games. In fact, I absolutely love the Borderlands series, so Tiny Tina's Wonderland has been an absolute blast to play, and so was Cyberpunk. Despite all its flaws on release, it was a really enjoyable experience. Sometimes games need high levels of guidance to ensure frustration or exploration fatigue don't kick in. For example, Assassin's Creed Valhalla is a game that takes roughly 90 hours to complete the main story. Now imagine if there was no guidance, no map markers. I'm 99% sure I would have quit the game or I'd still be playing to this date. The world is too large, there are too many side quests, too much optional content to do. It's necessary for the game to have a guidance system that ensures that you always know what you can do next. The game tells you where all the side content is, you don't have to go out searching for it. The benefits of this system are pretty obvious. The player saves time, avoids the frustration of getting lost, and knows that they're not missing any awesome side content along the way. But the downside is, they don't get the exploration high of finding a cool side mission, a mini-boss, a dungeon full of powerful loot. Of course, you can still find these things, but you don't get the excitement of discovering it, because the game tells you it's there anyways. Not only this, it takes away from the mastery of a game. The skill ceiling is lowered. You no longer have to bother with remembering map layouts, the optimal path between two locations, or how to reach a specific spot, because the game tells you all of this. It takes away from the potential skill needed to master the game, which for the casual player probably isn't an issue at all. But for someone who plays the game multiple times, it takes away from expressing mastery of the map in future playthroughs, simply because there is no need for mastery at all. Hold your hand games may be the lazy way of directing the player. Rather than through excellent level design and other unique guidance methods, the player is told where to go and how to get there. But in saying that, it might not be the reason for playing. Take Forza Horizon 5 as an example. The purpose of the game is to race various different vehicles across a variety of different courses. So when a player wishes to do the next race, they want to be guided straight to it, not given a vague idea of where the event is. Holding the player's hand is what the player wants. They want to be told the shortest route to the next goal, because it's not why they're playing the game. Hold your hand games are making us lazier, without a doubt. I used to spend hours exploring Halo 2 as a kid, a game that has a linear route through each level. But over the years I've become more time pressed. I don't want to spend hours not sure if I'm wasting my time or actually progressing. I want to be told how to progress and where I need to go next. It's something that's different for everyone. I personally don't enjoy playing low guidance games in Elden Ring as much as I probably would have 4 years ago, because I don't have enough time to give to low guidance games in order to get the full experience. That's why I think medium guidance games are the ideal type of guidance games can have, because it's a balance between giving excess direction and giving none at all. I do, however, have 2 questions for you. What type of guidance level do you prefer, and do you think that modern games hold your hands while playing? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. Also, if you found this video enjoyable, it'd be greatly appreciated if you could like and subscribe, so I know to make more content like this.